So let's go to what are the great challenges of this century. Well, you have the pandemic, which is unprecedented and causing havoc not only in the casualties of the people dying from coronavirus, but also with the effects of the economic shutdown, causing an unprecedented effect to the world economy, where about half of it is locked down. And now you have an increasing rebellion in some countries where the population no longer agrees that these measures are necessary. And, actually some of the authorities are fearing a murmur of mass opposition and implicitly chaos. Now, that's just one aspect. This intersects with incredible economic effects. The ILO, the International Labour Organization, just published figures saying that 60% of all jobs in the world, that is 2 billion of 3.3 billion jobs, are actually the informal economy. Now, under conditions of lockdown, that means that these people who are living from the hand to the mouth are thrown overnight into an absolute crisis of not having enough to eat. Now, in Africa, the informal economy is 86%, 50% in India, and there, where the lockdown already takes place since the end of March, it is an absolute social crisis which is building up. Now, on top of that comes reports from the World Food Programme that we are looking at the danger of a world famine. On the 21st of April, David Beasley, the director of the World Food Programme, briefed the UN Security Council that we are heading towards a famine of biblical dimensions. Now, what that means is already before this crisis erupted, 821 million people are living in permanent food insecurity. The World Food Programme, as in the past, gave food relief for 80 million of those people. And because of the pandemic and escalation of many other crises, this number is jumping up to 265 million a year. Now, if this famine would fully develop, as Mr. Beasley is warning, the death rate of famine could go up to 300,000 people a day. Now, if food can be mobilized, it can be averted, but that danger clearly exists. In Africa, there are 194 million people in need of food supplies in 37 nations. In Asia, it's 61 million in 10 nations. In Latin America, it's 33 million in 6 nations. Now, the problem is that because of the crisis of agriculture, the tonnage needed to relieve this shortage may not be there. Farmers in the United States and in Europe are protesting that, because of the policies of the EU, which imposes completely unreasonable conditions on the farmers, their existence is threatened. So large tractorcades were already going in the streets since last fall. In the United States, many farms are in danger of going out of business. There is now, because of the coronavirus crisis, a shortage developing where food is being rationed, meat is rationed in the United States. Food processing and meat packing plants are being closed down because of the infection of the employees. Now, these are not things which cannot be remedied, but they demand a very urgent action. Now, that is why the Schiller Institute, in the spirit of Lyndon LaRouche, is calling for a four-power agreement, and why we are having an international mobilization, including an effort to get the use of this word mobilized to this effect, to demand with a chorus of countries and forces around the world that the four most important countries of the world must make an emergency summit and fix the world system. Where should the solution come from, if not from the most powerful governments? The United States, Russia, China, and India, supported by other nations, must fix this situation. There is no other place. The G20, well, they had the chance. There are too many forces who are moving in different directions. The G7, you can almost forget. Other regional organizations, as valuable as they may be, like the BRICS, the SCO, other organizations I could name, but you have to have a powerful combination of countries which has the power together to force the change of the system. Now, there is a program which can be the blueprint to start this kind of infrastructure global development tomorrow if the political will can be mobilized. And that is the program which we published in 2014 called The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge. This was our answer to President Xi Jinping putting the New Silk Road on the agenda. And this was a program we have worked on literally since more than 40 years. It contains a concrete development plan for Africa, which we published in 1976. It contains a program for the integration of Latin America, for the development of South Asia, the Pacific Basin, the Eurasian Land Bridge, the Oasis Plan for the Middle East, and many aspects more. So we have a blueprint to completely start the development of the planet immediately. As a first step, you need to implement a new Bretton Woods system to replace the casino economy, which is bankrupt and which is only kept alive by insane amounts of liquidity pumped by the central banks, which will lead in the short term to a hyperinflationary blowout of the entire system. And we have to go back to the idea of Bretton Woods as Franklin D. Roosevelt intended it, namely that the main aim would have been to overcome poverty in the developing countries by providing long-term low-interest credit lines for a real industrialization of the developing countries. As this program was never implemented because of the untimely death of Roosevelt and the fact that Churchill and Truman organized much of the environment of the actual Bretton Woods, which was then implemented despite some useful features it had. Now, obviously, Roosevelt's idea that the need to overcome poverty and increase the living standard of the entire world population as the precondition for a durable peace and stability is absolutely valid today. We also need to combine that, and the four powers must combine that with the implementation of the four laws of Lyndon LaRouche. First, you need a global Glass-Steagall separation of the banks. The commercial banks must be protected. The casino part of the finance system has to be basically ended. Then you need a national bank in the tradition of Alexander Hamilton in every country for credit generation, and you need to combine these national banks internationally into a new Bretton Woods system, which then provides these credit lines for large development projects. Then the fourth law of Lyndon LaRouche is even more important because it defines the basis for the implementation of the common aims of mankind. We need to increase the productivity of the entire world economy because as the present coincidence of crises, of the pandemic, the famine, the collapse of the real economy demonstrate the present industrial capacities of the entire world economy are not sufficient to provide for the livelihood of the existing population of more than 7 billion people today. So we need a crash program for the implementation of the commercial use of fusion power, which is largely a question of international cooperation and large funding. We need to invest in biophysics to find the causes of the coronavirus and many other potential viruses which could come easily after this pandemic. There is no guarantee that not an even more horrible virus would follow immediately afterwards. And we have to understand the issues of life, the issues of the laws of the universe better in order to combat these kinds of threats. And naturally, we need international space cooperation, which is the way to the future, and the more adult cooperation of the human civilization. So there are very concrete steps. I think the obvious immediate one is we need a world health system. Every single country of the world must have a health system which is as good as the standard used to be in the United States with the Hill-Burton standard, or as the health systems of Germany and France were before the privatization of the health sector began in the 70s. Naturally, you need a crash program, temporary hospitals, the kinds of measures which were done in Hubei province and Wuhan. But then naturally, you have to turn that into permanent health facilities. And for that, you need infrastructure. You can't put a hospital in the middle of the desert. You have to earnestly start to overcome the underdevelopment of the developing countries. But the big question is mankind fit to survive? Can we create a basis, an order of international relations among nations which guarantees the durable survivability of the human species? And I would like to have that question answered in a positive way.